Hi, and welcome back to El Paso Community College Culinary Arts Chef's Share series here on YouTube. I'm Chef Rosser back with you again. Today we're going to be talking about and demonstrating some principles involving vacuum sealing and sous vide cooking. And this is a little misunderstood out there. So we're going to try to help you guys clear up some of the misconceptions about it. We're going to go through the different types of equipment that are available, whether it's commercial models or stuff that's available for home use. And we're going to show you some techniques involved with sous vide cooking. Let's go ahead and get to it. And as always, if you like this video series, please subscribe. And if you have any ideas that you'd like us to do for you, please let us know. Let's go ahead and get moving on this. So these are a couple of vacuum sealer machines that I'm going to demonstrate for you. Now this big guy here is a commercial model, and these can cost upwards of $1,200, $1,500 or more depending on the size and the features you want. Now this is a professional model. This would not be real practical for home use because of its bulk and its cost, obviously, but these are great machines, and the way they operate is you close the lid with the bag in here and it vacuums out all of the air in the entire chamber, whereas this smaller model just sucks the air out of the bag at regular room pressure. So I'm going to demonstrate for you guys how these work in just a minute, but this commercial Berkel, like I said, fairly bulky, fairly expensive, but it's got a lot of features. It's programmable as far as the sealing and the pressure that you can adjust that. So this is a great model, workhorse in the restaurants. This is just a standard off-the-shelf food saver. These cost about $150, and so they're readily available for home use. Really simple to use, easy to clean. So depending on what it is you need from these machines, the price can really climb. So let's go ahead and take a look and see how these items work, right? So the first thing I'm going to demonstrate for you guys is I'm going to put some eggs, crack some eggs, and do kind of a poached egg variation in a bag for the Berkel machine. And it's on. I'm just going to very gently crack an egg in the bag, and you'll notice that I cuff the bag. By folding back that leading edge, I'm going to make sure that I don't get it dirty and that it's going to seal properly. And I just want to set this down and gently open that egg into that bag. And don't leave the shell in there, right? So there's my egg in a bag, right? It looks kind of strange, but this is a really neat sous vide technique. I'm going to put a little piece of butter in there and a pinch of salt and pepper. I'm going to fold that cuffed edge over, and I'm going to put it in my machine. And just simply close the lid. Now this will take almost a minute to complete, but what this does is it equalizes the pressure in here, and then it sucks all of the air out to get negative pressure. Then it seals the bag. It's a really great tool in the restaurants, like I said, but they can be fairly expensive. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to vacuum seal an egg, and what we're going to do is poach this in a bag, and we're going to add some salt, pepper, and butter. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my egg, and I want to crack it in a bowl so that I don't make sure I don't get any shells in there. And then with that egg in the bowl, I'm going to put a little bit of butter into it. And you don't need a whole lot. You need about a teaspoon or less. A little bit of butter and a little bit of salt and pepper. And I'm going to gently pour that into my bag. And you'll notice that I've cuffed the top edge so that I don't get any grease or dirt on or food on the cuff, so that's where it will seal properly. I'm going to gently pour this down in there. You want to do this very carefully so you don't break the yolk. I'm going to uncuff the bag. And make sure that that edge that was cuffed goes right on the sealing bar. So the way that this machine works is once it's sealed, it starts vacuuming all of the air out. Once it gets to that negative pressure, it's going to seal the bag. So it effectively operates in a vacuum. And this takes 45 seconds. It's pumping all of the air out, and then you'll hear a big whoosh as the air rushes back in after the bag is sealed. And there is our sealed egg, and I would put this in water at 145 degrees for about an hour, hour and a half, and we're going to get a really beautifully poached, seasoned egg. Yes, it takes a while, but you get a nice effect out of it by seasoning it and adding the butter. So the next item that I'm going to demonstrate, and I'm going to do this on the Food Saver, the home model, is a chicken galantine. And what this is a chicken with the whole skin has been removed in one piece and laid out. We then slice the white meat thinly and lay it over the skin. And then we make, with the dark meat, we make a force meat, or kind of, I guess, like a sausage. Put it all together, roll it up really tight in plastic wrap. We're going to vacuum seal this and put this in the sous vide cooker. And we'll talk about the sous vide cooking in a little bit, and I'll show you. We'll drop the egg and the chicken galantine in there. So let's take a look at this piece of equipment. So this Food Saver, I bought this at Sam's Club, and it was about $140, $130. The way these operate is they have a roll of bags, an open-ended roll of bags in them, and you can roll it out however long you need. So the first thing that you're going to do with one of these machines is make a seal on your bag so that on the bottom, so that you can cut it to the length. So it's real simple. You just turn it on and press seal. That seals one end of the bag because it's a continuously open bag on the entire roll. And these machines also come with different sized rolls and individual bags, just cut bags. Light goes off, it's ready to open. And there's the seal on my lower portion of the bag. Now what I want to do with this is cut it long enough to fit the entire chicken in there, and the entire galantine in there, and then seal it up. So about like that. I'm going to get my cutter bar, close it, and open it back up, and there's my bag. So as usual, I like to cuff the bag to make sure that it's going to have a clean seal up here. I'm going to slide my galantine in there, just center it, uncuff that edge. I'm going to open the machine, and the edge of the bag needs to go in this little rectangle here. I'm going to push the machine back so my galantine doesn't fall off the edge of the table. Straighten out my edge and turn the machine on, and then back and seal. And these work a little slower, and that you have to have special bags for these. You can't use something like a Ziploc bag. These bags are made with channels in it that allows the air to get sucked out, and you can see and hear that the machine is straining. That means it's sucked all of the air out, and then it's sealing this item. I love these machines, whether I'm doing sous vide at home or I want to preserved food. It's like if you buy a big block of cheese and you're not going to eat it all before it goes bad, you can put it in the vacuum and it lasts twice as long. So there we have a really nice vacuum seal. Getting all of the air out is super important for the principle of sous vide cooking, and we're going to talk about that next when we look at our sous vide equipment. So here's our chicken galantine. We're going to go put that in just a second. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is our immersion circulators, or sous vide machines as they're known. Basically what these things do is hold very precise temperatures submerged in water. And that is the whole principle of sous vide cooking. And the French translation is literally under vacuum. So we're vacuuming out all of the air from an item, and then we're cooking it at a very precise temperature in hot water. And what that allows us to do is get very precise cooking to a very specific degree. And depending on what it is you're looking for from the finished item, that precise cooking can really make a huge difference over a long period of time. Now, something like a steak, if I'm cooking a steak on top of the stove, there's a very small window to get that steak perfectly cooked. And what we're going to demonstrate for you here today is that I'm going to cook a steak partially in the sous vide and then finish it very quickly to sear. So I'm taking it to 130, which will be a perfect medium rare. And then all I'm going to do is finish the outside, give it a nice crust and some flavor. And that's what these machines are perfect for. So let's take a look at the models that we have here. This is a home model, and this is a Nova immersion circulator. This thing, they're between $70 and $250, depending on the model you buy and the features you want, just like anything else. This one, I believe, was about $150 a few years ago. I have this container with the lid cut out so that it doesn't steam off. And I have a wire rack down at the bottom to keep items from sinking to the bottom and not moving, really. So this thing, great option for home. Now, as far as commercial use, I don't know that I would rely on these solely, these home models, because they're just not built for daily use. Moving over here next is our Polyscience, and this version here is about, I'd say, probably 10 years old. And this is a self-contained unit, and you'll see that the immersion circulator is bolted into the machine here with our temperature settings, and this one is set at 184.3 degrees, so very precise. And then you open the lid right here, and our water bath or bain-marie is there. Now, these can be a little space consuming if you don't need them all the time, and then changing the water is a little difficult with these, but these Polyscience units are some of the best on the market. They hold temperature extremely well, very precise, and they're workhorses. This has been around for years and years, and it works perfectly every time. But like I said, it's a little bulky and sometimes difficult to change the water out and clean. So just keep that in mind. The next model we have is our Fusion Chef model, and this is what is known as a drop-in model. So it's much like the home version, where this unit can be taken off and put onto different size vessels. This is definitely a commercial unit. These run about $1,200 to $1,500 depending on the features you want, but these are workhorses as well. These things are super precise. Again, it wouldn't be very appropriate for home use, but for commercial use in the restaurants, these things are great. You get what you pay for, and I know this unit will last a long, long time and stand up to everyday use. All right, so next thing we're going to do is start cooking. This item that we're going to be putting into the sous vide machine is going to be a bone roll tie beef short rib. Now, this is a really tough cut of meat, so it needs a long, slow cook. We're going to do this at 185 for about 12 hours, 185 degrees in the circulator for 12 hours. But I want to prep this first. So the first thing I'm going to do is season this with salt and pepper. I've got some aromatics that I'm going to use to sear it. So I'm just going to get a nice coating of seasoning on that. And I've got my saute pan warming up. And I need to make sure I get plenty of seasoning on this because once it's in the bag, I can't adjust the seasoning. It has to cook all the way, and then we're going to open it and finish it. So I've got my seasoning on there. I've got my aromatics here. We're going to come over here to the stove, and I'm going to crank my heat up, get my pan nice and hot, and you'll notice I'm using a fairly small pan for this. I don't want too big of a pan because what I put in there will scorch. So I just want to make sure that I have enough room for the item that I'm cooking, and then I'm going to put it in the bag. So this is a searing procedure. So we want really high heat and just form color on the outside. We're not trying to cook it all the way through. We're trying to seal the outside basically with high heat, lock in that flavor and that moisture, and then the slow, long cooking with the sous vide is going to break down that tough connective tissue and make what would be a really tough piece of meat if we tried to cook it quickly. It's going to make it fork tender to where we don't need a knife to cut it. All right, so my pan's on high, it's getting nice and hot. I'm going to get a little bit of oil in there, about a tablespoon, and it's shimmering already, so I'm going to just drop my short rib in, make sure it's not sticking, and I want to try to sear as much of the exterior of this as possible, get a nice dark color on it, and that's what's known as the Maillard reaction, and it's a complex reaction of the enzymes of this product, kind of like caramelization, but meat doesn't have available sugars to caramelize, so that's the Maillard reaction. And for this, the hotter the better. And I'm going to sear it on all sides, and I'll show you after it comes off. Okay, so our short rib is nicely seared all around, and you can see that we've developed a beautiful brown exterior. That does a couple of things. One, it sears in all of the flavor, and it helps to retain moisture. So we're going to let this cool for just a minute before we put it in our bag. We don't want to melt our bag because this is extremely hot. And while we're waiting for it to cool, I'm going to tell you that this is a bone rolled Thai short rib. This is a very specialty kind of butcher product that you can ask your butcher for. They split the bone in half, take the short rib off of it, and then tie it around the bone. So this is a really kind of upscale kind of presentation. Typically when you find short ribs in the grocery store, they're in little short chunks with the bone on. This is just something for effect. In a restaurant, you could charge a premium for something like this, make a really beautiful presentation out of it. All right, so we're gonna let this continue to cool, and I'm gonna set it on my sizzle platter while it does, and get my hot pan out of here. We don't wanna get burned, right? So that's really hot. We're gonna let that cool off before we put it in water. We don't wanna warp our pan. And I'm going to put that in my bag with some aromatics. I've got a clove of garlic, a sprig of rosemary, and a little bit of thyme. I'm just going to drop that in my bag. Here I've got a little bit of beef demi-glace and braising liquid from short ribs that I did earlier. So I'm just going to mix that up. And you don't need a lot of liquid in here because during the cooking process, a lot of the liquid is going to come out of this. But I want to get a little bit of flavor into the bag with that short rib just to enrich the qualities of it. And I'm going to put about a tablespoon or so of this braising liquid and demi-glace in there. And once I vacuum it, it's all of the air is going to come out, and this will be that meat will be effectively soaking in this liquid. All right, so just a little bit of that in there. Set that aside. And let me clean my bag really quickly. You want to make sure that these bags don't get any oil or food liquid on that cuff that you create. And let me see if this is warm. I think that's cool enough to put in. So we're just going to very carefully put this in our bag. And I want that bone facing up towards the seam. There we go. You have to be really careful putting bones in these vacuum bags because if sharp edges will puncture the bag, and this will just fill up with water during the time that it's cooking. All right, next we're going to go into our machine. And let me come around. Sorry. All right, so our rib is in the bag, and now we're just going to vacuum seal it. Once this is sealed in the bag, then it's ready to go into the immersion circulator or the sous vide machine. Now remember, the rib, very tough meat, so we're going to cook it at a bit higher temperature, 185. We're going to look to cook it all the way through and start breaking down some of that tough connective tissue. So that's going to go in at 185 for about 8 to 12 hours, depending on the consistency that you're looking for from this. Now, you can find a lot of different guides to how to use sous vide preparations, and they vary drastically. So depending on what you want out of the finished product and your experience, you're gonna figure out how you like things, what your ideal or optimal temperature settings are, and times as well, because it all makes a difference. But the best thing to do is practice with it. All right, so there is our beautiful short rib ready to go in. We're going to put that in 185 degrees, 8 to 12 hours. So this is our cooked short rib, and yes, we do a little TV magic for you. I had one ready. I've got the one that I showed searing in the circulator now. I'm going to open this up and look at all the beautiful liquid that comes out of this. Now we can make a pan sauce with this very easily. What I would do is just reduce this down, strain it, add a little butter to it, and you've got a beautiful pan sauce. So there's just a ton of liquid that comes out of there from the cooking, and also from that liquid that we added to it. All right. So I'm going to take this out, and I'm just going to finish this in the oven. I'm going to dry it out a little bit and kind of sear it in the oven, give it a little crust because it's kind of wet. We want to dry it out, make it a little more palatable for presentation. I'm going to put this in the oven that I've got set at 425 degrees, and that usually takes about 10 to 20 minutes depending on the size of the item. We just want to dry it out a little bit and give it a little bit of crust on the exterior, and that'll retain all the moisture inside, and we'll have a beautiful product. We'll take a look at that shortly. So next we're going to put our packaged rib into our 185 degree water bath, and remember that's going to go in there from 8 to 12 hours depending on what it is you're looking for. One thing I like to do, especially when the water is really, really hot, is I like to hang the edge of the bag right over the container. You can use clips for that or whatever. Also, I'm going to put our chicken galantine into our 160 degree water bath, and remember this is for about 8 hours. And just to let you know, the minimum internal cooking temperature for chicken is 165 degrees. That's not going to happen in the water bath, so we're not going to eat it straight out of there. Once this chicken is done, we're going to put it in a hot oven and roast the exterior. We're going to get color. We're going to bring it up to its final internal temperature, and then it's ready to eat. Okay? We'll take a look at these in just a little bit. I have some ready for you, and we'll cut to those, and I'll show you how they look prepared. Our chicken galantine has been in the sous vide for about 8 hours, and it comes out, it doesn't look very good like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop this thing in the oven and get some color on it. Now I'm just going to lightly season the exterior to give it a little bit better texture and flavor, and we want to be real careful when we're handling this. We don't want to tear that skin before we get a nice crisping on that. I'm going to pick the best side to have up in the oven so that we get a beautiful coloration on it. So just lightly seasoned, and then this is going to go into that 425 degree oven for about 10 to 20 minutes, just till we get the coloration we want. We're just looking for some light browning on this. We're not looking for it to get too dark. We want to keep that nice integral part of the chicken without drying it out. Just get a little bit of color. So this is going to go in our oven. We'll check this in about 10 minutes. Our short rib's been in the oven for about 15 minutes, and we're going to pull that out and take a look at it now. So this thing should have a really nice dried exterior, but not overly dried. So that looks way different from when we put it in the oven a few minutes ago. We're gonna put it on a plate and take a look at this. All right, so I've got my scissors and we're just going to always take off the butcher's twine that you have on there. This would not be a good thing for your guests to get on their plate. So we're always gonna make sure we take off the twine. And then I'm just simply gonna cut this thing open so you can take a look at this beautiful exterior. It is fall apart tender. And look at that beautiful interior. That is amazing. I wish we had smell-o-vision right now because I'm getting hungry. I hope you are too. Try making short ribs in the sous vide machine. You'll love them, I guarantee. The next item I'm gonna show you how to sous vide is a steak. Now what I've got here is a big old ribeye. Now this is a fairly fatty cut. And when steaks are this thick, they can get a little tricky to cook on a grill or in a broiler. Now what we want to do is first of all, we're going to season the outside of this properly, and I'm just going to heavily salt and pepper this because this meat is so thick. We need to get a good amount of this on there. I'm going to turn it over, get a little more in there. So this is a beautiful mix of kosher salt and pepper that I'm using. And I want to get it coated all around. That's why I'm using this little plastic tray as my seasoning platter. After I do that, I'm going to vacuum seal this. I have some thyme, some rosemary, and some sliced shallots that I'm going to put in the bag with that. I've also got some garlic that I'm going to finish it with. And after I seal this in the bag, I'm going to cook this at 130 degrees for an hour to 2 hours. Now, depending on how thick it is, that's going to tell you basically how long you need to leave it in the immersion circulator or the sous vide for. This is a fairly thick cut, so I'm going to leave it in for at least an hour and a half at 130 degrees. What that's going to do is ensure that when I take this out and sear it, the cooking is going to be extremely fast. I'm just going to brown the outside of it. Also, I'm going to have a perfect medium rare without having to leave it exposed to that heat for very long. So just a quick sear and it's done. If you've never had your steak sous vide before, it's amazing. I highly recommend it, whether in a restaurant or at home. Give it a shot. We'll come back after I vacuum seal this and put it in the water, and I'm going to finish one of these for you on the stovetop. So here is our beautiful ribeye bagged with all of the aromatics. So we've got the thyme, the shallots, and rosemary and shallots on the other side. This is going to go in at 130 degrees for at least an hour and a half. Now, depending on the thickness of the cut of the meat you're using and also how fatty it is, because remember, fat acts as an insulator, you want to make sure you leave it in for enough time. So this one, at least an hour to 2 hours. So I'm heading right in the middle, hour and a half, 130 degrees, and we'll come back and take a look at that later, and I'll cook one off for you with a beautiful blue cheese compound butter. Our beautiful ribeye has been in at 130 degrees for an hour and a half, and it doesn't look so beautiful anymore, but I'm gonna show you how to finish this in a pan very, very quickly. Now remember, we're not trying to cook this all the way through. All we're looking to do is give color on the outside. So let's cut this open. I want to get this out of the bag, and I don't want all of that liquid that has come out of there, and those aromatics, the shallot, rosemary, and thyme have done their job. So I'm just going to set this on my sizzle platter, clean up a little bit, excuse me. Then I'm going to move this over to my stove area. I've got a heavy French steel pan here, and this is going to conduct heat really, really well. I'm just going to use a little bit of cooking oil. I've got those aromatics that we talked about that I'm going to use during the saute process, and I'm going to get a little extra oil in there so that I can baste that with my saucing spoon. All right. As soon as my pan heats up, we'll come back. So our pan's nice and hot. First thing we're going to do is get a little bit of oil in there. And I don't mind having some extra oil in for a searing process like this, and you'll see why in just a second. Let that oil coat the pan, and then I'm going to get my steak in there. And I want to make sure it's not going to stick. So give the pan a shake, make sure it's not sticking. And I'm going to let this cook on really high until I get a beautiful hard sear on the outside like we did with the short rib. And then it's going to be done, but I want to get all of the sides. I'm going to turn it over and then get the edges as well. So this is going to take a few minutes, but the great thing about this is if this steak was uncooked completely, this process would leave it cooked on the outside and raw in the center. Now some people like to eat their steak that way, but with the sous vide process, it's really precise. We're just going to look to get that hard sear on the outside and have that beautifully cooked interior already, okay? So I'm going to dump in my aromatics, which is some thyme, rosemary, and some whole garlic cloves. And I'm just going to let those perfume that oil that steak is cooking in. And oh yeah, I wish we had smell-o-vision because this smells amazing. That the rosemary and thyme get very fragrant and the sear is happening. The reason I have extra oil is I like to take my spoon and spoon over the top of the steak while it's cooking to make that temperature a little more consistent and start the process of cooking while one side's down in the pan and the other side can start getting some hot aromatic oil on it. All right, so we'll come back and I'll flip this steak in a minute and you can take a look at that. So our steak's been cooking for about 3 minutes on one side. Let's go ahead and flip that over and take a look. Look at that beautiful sear on that. We're going to do the same thing on the other side and then turn it on its edges just to finish it. So remember, turn it, give your pan a shake, make sure it's not sticking. And then I'm going to start that basting process again, getting that hot oil over this side as well. And those aromatics are really perfuming the oil and getting this steak just smelling amazing. All right, we'll come back and take a look at this in a minute. I'm searing the edges now to make sure we get good color all around. Okay, so our steak is done. We're going to bring this over here to our table so you can take a look at that beautiful coloration that we've got on that. We've got that gorgeous sear. You can hear that sizzle. This smells amazing. Now before we cut into this, I need to let this rest for about 10 minutes. If I cut it too soon, what's going to happen is all that moisture on the interior of this product is going to start coming out. So I'm going to set it on my sizzle platter for about 10 minutes just to rest in a warm spot so that we keep this beautiful steak intact. All right? And then we're going to finish it with a beautiful blue cheese compound butter. So this beautiful ribeye has been resting for about 10 minutes. We're going to put it on our cutting board. And this is a pretty formidable piece of meat. So rather than just dropping it on a plate and letting our customers have at it, I'm just going to pre-cut it and put it on a plate so you can see what it looks like inside. All right? So that's that. Remember, 130 degrees, we're going to get that beautiful medium rare, which means a cool pink interior. And we've got that beautiful sear on the outside. And that just delicious fatty marbling that's going on inside of a ribeye. I'm just going to cut a couple more pieces and we're going to lay it on the plate, and I've got that beautiful blue cheese compound butter. It's good. This is going to be a really amazing plate. Let me get some of this on here. It's super juicy, just like it should be, and nice and warm. And we've got this beautiful blue cheese butter, and I'm just going to kind of cut this up and put it on top of there. Let that melt in. Just dot that fanned out steak with that butter. And there you have it, sous vide steak. Our chicken's been in the oven for about 20 minutes, and we got some really beautiful color on there, and we didn't tear the skin at all. So we're going to carefully get this off of our rack. We're going to bring this over to our cutting board, and I want to slice this open to show you just how gorgeous the interior of this is. Let me turn that towards the camera. And I'm just gonna cut about 1-inch slices off of this. And that reached that internal temperature of 165, so this is perfectly safe to eat now. You gotta be real careful cutting it. You don't wanna disrupt that just delicious skin there. And there's the interior. We've got the white meat on the outside towards that beautiful crispy skin. And then we've got that chicken force meat with cranberries, roasted garlic, and herbs. Enjoy that. The next objective that we're gonna put into the sous vide machine is poached apples. Now you can do this with pears or apples, either one. I like the consistency of a Granny Smith apple, nice and firm. They poach really well. We've got a red wine reduction here to poach them in. We don't need a lot. Let me go through the process with you really quick. We're just gonna peel these very quickly and then core them and then put them in the bag with our poaching liquid. And these are gonna cook in the sous vide at 141 degrees for anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. We don't want these to break down and get too soft, but we do want to cook them through and stain them with that beautiful red wine reduction. So we're going to peel that, use our apple core, and we're still going to have to clean up a little bit after we get the core out, just to make sure that we don't leave any skin or seeds in there. And I'm going to use the Parisian scoop or a melon baller for that, and just get any skin off. And you can actually carve out a hole in the middle and stuff these with like almond paste. You can put cheese in them. There's so many things you can do with these apples and really make a beautiful dessert out of these. All right, so there's our prepared apple. Nice and clean, nice hole in that. We're gonna go ahead and put that in our bag, and we're gonna finish doing that to our other 2 apples, and then we'll come back, seal it, put it in the immersion circulator at 141 degrees for 8 to 12 hours. I have my peeled and cored apples in the bag and my simple syrup red wine reduction here. And I'm gonna pour about 3/4 of a cup of that into my bag. I don't need it to cover them because remember, once this machine seals this bag, they're going to be in direct contact with that liquid, and I don't want a big wet mess. So just a little bit to partially cover in the bag. I'm going to lay my bag carefully in here. I'm going to take out my base plate so that I don't get a spill in there. Now this can be a little tricky to do when you've got liquids involved. If you have too much liquid in your bag, what can happen is the vacuum machine will pull it out and it can make a mess. So fingers crossed, right? We're gonna get this sealed up and then put it in our immersion circulator, 141 degrees, 8 to 12 hours. So here's our apples vacuum sealed. You can see there's no air in there. That liquid is in contact directly with the apples on all surfaces. So at this point, into the immersion circulator, 141 degrees, 8 to 12 hours. I've got some ready for you. I'm gonna put these in. We'll come back and take a look at the ones that are ready. Here we have our poached apples, and you can see that the staining has taken place really well. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this bag open and dump it in my container. And I'm going to take one out for you guys to have a look at. Throw this away. And let's get one of these guys out. They're nice and soft, but they're not mushy, and that's a really important part of this fruit. Doing the fruit, we don't want to overcook them. So I'm going to cut a section of this. And look at how beautifully that stains. This is just amazing. Now, like I said, you can do this with pears or apples, even slightly underripe peaches. This is just an amazing way to present fruit. This would go well with a savory dish. You could serve this with chicken or fish. This would be a wonderful dessert presentation with a little blue cheese or a cake and some fresh whipped cream, whatever the case is. So this is just a really versatile way to handle fruits in the sous vide. You get a wonderful, not quite soft, not quite firm texture out of this when you do it at that temperature for that time, and that just amazing staining that you get across that fruit is really gorgeous. Now you could vary the time and the temperature to your liking. Play with these things at home or in the restaurant and figure out how you want to get the flavor profile, the staining, the presentation. This is just a great way to present a really inexpensive, very accessible piece of fruit in a very nice way. So enjoy the apples or pears or whatever it is that you're putting in your sous vide. Next objective I'm going to show you is poached eggs. Now these eggs have gone in the immersion circulator at 145 degrees for 45 minutes. What that is going to allow us to do is gently break open the shell and have part of that white partially coagulated, so we can dump it into our poaching liquid and get a really nice looking presentation, hopefully. So what you need to do is hold that egg carefully. I use the back of the spoon just to crack the shell, and I want to crack a window on it, so I'm going to kind of crack around there, and then I need to carefully peel that, making sure to get all that broken peel off and into my bowl. And you'll see this real kind of translucent, ghostly white egg white under there that it's only partially coagulated. And we're going to finish the job in our poaching liquid, which is just hot water at about 160 degrees with a little bit of white vinegar in it to help coagulate the egg proteins. All right. So I've cracked the window in there, and I'm just very gently going to dump this in the water. And the water's a little murky, but you can still see that egg. What I want to do is make sure that my egg doesn't sink to the bottom and stick. So I just want to gently move that water, get my spoon under that egg, and push it around just to move it so that it continues to poach nice and gently. All we're looking for to happen is the egg whites to continue coagulating. We're going to look for that yolk to be nice and runny. So eggs are a great thing to use in this immersion circulator. It's not a strict sous vide process because there's no vacuuming involved unless we, like I showed you earlier in the pouch. But you can make a real wide range of texture, get a real wide range of textures and consistency out of the eggs by using the immersion circulator, from really ghostly and runny like this to the perfect hard-boiled egg and everything in between. So for this poached egg, remember it was 145 degrees for 45 minutes. If I wanted to do soft boiled eggs, I would do them at 140 degrees for roughly 45 minutes, and then for hard-boiled eggs, 150 degrees for 45 minutes. Play with this. The best advice I can give is to start with your eggs at room temperature. So if you're going to do this in the morning in a restaurant, leave your eggs out overnight, put them in the circulator so you don't have that temperature rebound factor that you have to deal with and having them come out undercooked. Let's check on our egg now. And the easiest way to do this, I just use my perforated spoon to wave that water very gently, make sure it's not sticking, and check the consistency of this. I'm going to turn this guy over, and I think it needs about 30 seconds and it's going to be a perfectly cooked egg, and I'll pull it out and show it to you. And we can cook these more or less depending on what you like. If you like a soft poached egg, then take it out a little earlier. If you want it poached a little firmer, leave it in a little longer. And you can see that the water's not boiling. We just see a little bit of shimmer on the surface and a little bit of steam coming off. That's the appropriate temperature. We want that at about 160, 165 degrees because that's going to help coagulate those egg proteins. All right, let's go ahead and check this out. So one thing I like to do is I like to take a towel and just absorb any excess water off of that egg, and I'm going to put it in a nice blue bowl so you can see some contrast. And there is our poached egg, and I'm going to go ahead and crack this open so you can see the consistency on the yolk there. beautiful, vibrant yellow yolk. So that's poached eggs.